Some high school memories are unforgettable. Others haunt you like a nightmare, even years later. Tonight, we'll be looking at 4 disturbing true high school horror stories. Let's begin with the first story. New kids I had just met. I had just transferred to Southern Lehigh High School in Pennsylvania. I didn't know anyone. Everyone had already formed their own friend groups, and the worst part of the day was lunch. One day, I was walking around with my tray looking for an empty seat when I realized every table was full. There was only one table with 2 guys sitting at it. I walked over and asked if I could sit there. They looked at each other for a second, then one of them said, "Sure." They were brothers. Their names were Antonio and Bruno. They seemed really friendly. After talking for a while, they invited me to hang out after school. Since I needed some friends, I agreed. I got their numbers, and later that evening Bruno texted me. He said that he and his brother were going to a cool spot in the woods and asked if I wanted to join them. It was my first week at the new school, and I didn't have any other plans, so I said yes. Around 10 o'clock that night, I left my house and started walking toward the location we had agreed on. While I was on my way, Bruno texted me again. He sent me their location and said they wanted to show me an area near their town. When I arrived, it was completely dark. I turned on my phone's flashlight and started looking for them. "Bruno?" I called out. No response. I called out again. Nothing. Just as I was thinking about turning around and heading home, I noticed movement in the bushes. Something suddenly darted out in front of me. Then I started hearing voices. A few seconds later, I heard someone clearly yell, "Get him!" That's when I realized this wasn't a joke. I immediately turned around and ran. I could hear several people chasing me. Thanks to the adrenaline, I ran faster than I ever had in my life, and eventually made it home. I told my family everything that had happened. The next day, we reported the incident to the school. About a week later, around midnight, I started hearing strange noises coming from my bedroom door. At first, I thought it was my dad walking down the hallway. But the sounds continued. Then I noticed shadows moving underneath my door. I went to my parents' room and woke them up. My dad told me it was probably just my imagination and said I should go back to sleep. I walked back to my room. Slowly, I opened the door. And what I saw made me freeze. There was a human silhouette standing behind it. I screamed. My dad came running. Together, we threw the door open completely, but there was nobody there. The police were called, and I told them everything. However, they couldn't find any evidence that anyone had been inside the house. They simply advised us to keep the doors locked and install security cameras outside. For months after that, I could barely sleep. Even now, I still think about that night. Maybe I should never have agreed to meet those kids in the woods. The locked locker. This happened in 2008. At the time, I was a high school student and a member of the school's volleyball team. One day after practice, I headed to the locker room to change and opened my locker. That's when I noticed someone. He was an older man, probably around 55 or 60 years old. It was obvious that he wasn't a student. He was wandering around near the gym, quietly watching everything. At first, I didn't think much of it. As practice ended, everyone gradually started leaving. I walked back over to my locker, but for some reason, it wouldn't open even though I entered the combination correctly. I tried again, and again. Still nothing. Eventually, I asked one of the assistant coaches to bring me the updated combination list. While I waited, the gym had nearly emptied out. The older man was still there. He was staring at me, smiling. I tried the combination again. It still didn't work. Then the man started walking toward me. At one point, he placed his hand on my shoulder. It made me uncomfortable, but I didn't say anything. I tried opening the locker one more time. This time, it finally opened. I quickly grabbed my things and started changing. By then, most of the lights in the gym had already been turned off. There was hardly anyone left inside. I grabbed my bag and headed for the exit. As I walked down the hallway, I noticed the man was watching me. He was only a few yards away. For a moment, I turned and looked back. He was still there, still smiling. I picked up my pace. As I got closer to the exit, I heard him call out from behind me. "Wait!" I didn't stop. A few seconds later, he called out again. "I want to show you something." That's when I started running. It was raining outside, but I didn't care. The moment I reached my car, I locked the doors. When I looked back toward the school, the man was still standing at the entrance, watching me. For a long time, I couldn't figure out what had happened that day. Maybe he was just a strange old man. Or maybe he had something much worse in mind. But there's one thing I do know. I never want to find out what would have happened if I'd been alone with him in that gym. The dark music room. Back in high school, I was a member of the school band. To be honest, the main reason I joined was because it was an easy way to get good grades. One day, after missing a few classes, my teacher told me I needed to make up the lost credit by doing individual practice sessions during lunch. That meant I would have to spend my lunch period in the practice rooms located on the upper floor of the music department. That part of the school had always been a little creepy. Narrow hallways, old doors, and small rooms that were usually empty. During lunch, I grabbed my saxophone and headed upstairs. There were small practice rooms on both sides of the hallway. I picked one at random, walked inside, and closed the door. My teacher was supposed to stop by later and make sure I was actually practicing. But honestly, instead of practicing music, I was playing games on my phone. About 15 minutes later, the lights suddenly went out. Everything went completely dark. The only light left was the glow from my phone's screen. At first, I assumed it was a power outage. I opened the door and looked out into the hallway. It was pitch black. That's when I heard something. It sounded like a large plastic container being dragged across the floor. Then came a strange, muffled growling noise. The sound was coming from somewhere deeper in the hallway. A few seconds later, I noticed a shadow moving in the darkness. Someone was walking down the corridor. Panicking, I quickly shut the door and hid back inside the room. My heart felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. I had no idea who it was. A student? A teacher? Or someone who wasn't supposed to be in the school at all? Minutes passed. I continued hearing footsteps in the hallway. A door opened, then closed. Another door, then another. It sounded like someone was checking every single room one by one. When the footsteps passed my room, I held my breath. The sound stopped, right outside my door. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then the footsteps slowly moved away again. I sat in the darkness for nearly 20 minutes. Eventually, I worked up the courage to leave. Slowly, I opened the door. The hallway was still dark. Using the light from my phone screen, I started making my way down the corridor. As I rounded a corner, I felt it again. That feeling. The feeling that someone was watching me. I stopped and listened. There wasn't a single sound. But I could feel that I wasn't alone. With shaking hands, I raised my phone slightly higher. And that's when I saw it. A silhouette standing only a few feet in front of me. It was facing me. I froze. 1 second. Maybe 2. Then my phone screen went dark. When I turned it back on, the silhouette was gone. At that point, I didn't care anymore. I ran. I sprinted down the hallway, raced down the stairs, and went straight into the music classroom. The lights were on there. Mr. Nicholson was inside. Out of breath, I told him everything that had happened. Security officers went upstairs and searched the entire hallway. But they didn't find anyone. Not a student. Not a teacher. Not even a trace. There were no security cameras in the music department. Because of that, I'll never know exactly what I saw that day. But even after all these years, I still haven't forgotten the silhouette staring at me from that dark hallway. I thought it was my friend. This happened during my high school years. One day, a few friends and I decided to explore an old, unused section of our school. At the back of the building, there was a door that was supposed to stay locked. Somehow, we managed to get it open and went inside. Beyond the door were hallways that hadn't been used in years. Dust-covered floors, empty classrooms, and narrow passageways with almost no lighting. At first, it seemed like a fun adventure. But the farther we went, the more uncomfortable the atmosphere became. The hallways seemed endless. The only light came from a few emergency exit signs hanging from the ceiling. My friends were walking ahead of me. After a while, one of them turned around and said, "Come on, let's go upstairs." I started following him. We climbed a flight of stairs. The upper floor was completely dark. Only the red glow of the exit signs faintly illuminated the area. I assumed the person walking ahead of me was one of my friends. So I continued following him in silence. Then my phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was Chris. I answered. "Where are you?" he asked. I was confused. "What do you mean, where am I?" "I'm right behind you guys." There was a few seconds of silence. Then I heard Chris's voice again. "No, dude, we're downstairs." It felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. I stopped walking. I looked at the person standing in front of me. He had stopped too. Slowly, he began turning toward me. At that exact moment, I could hear my other friends talking through the phone. They really were downstairs. Which meant the person standing in front of me wasn't one of them. The hallway fell completely silent. Then a low laugh echoed from the darkness. It wasn't a voice I recognized. My phone nearly slipped from my hand. The silhouette in front of me took a few steps forward. I slowly started backing away. My heart was pounding. Then, without warning, the figure stepped through a nearby doorway. The door slammed shut behind it. At that moment, the only thing I could think about was getting out of there. I turned around and ran toward the stairs. By the time I reached the lower floor, I was completely out of breath. I found my friends and told them what had happened. At first, they thought I was joking. But when they saw the look on my face, they became serious. Together, we headed for the exit. Just as we were about to leave the school, one of us suddenly stopped. He was staring silently down the dark hallway. The rest of us looked too. There was someone standing at the far end of the corridor. We couldn't make out a face. All we could tell was that whoever it was, they were staring directly at us. Nobody moved. For several long seconds, we just stood there. Then all of us started running. We didn't even look back until we were outside the building. To this day, we've never found out who that person was. Maybe it was someone hiding inside the school. Maybe it was just someone trying to scare us. But the part that still bothers me is this. Before my phone rang, I had been following that person for nearly 10 minutes, believing they were my friend. And during all that time, they never once turned around and showed me their face. Those were 4 disturbing true high school horror stories. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. And as always, stay safe.